First of all, kind of apologies for absence for the Licensing Regulatory Committee.
None received, Chair.
Sorry, licensing. Sorry, none. Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Do you agree they're a true record? Do you mind if I sign them? Okay. Subcommittee meeting for information only. Presume you've looked at that. Thank you. Disclosures of members' interest. No one's interested. Thank you. Report of the head of Housing and Public Protection regarding licence fees.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. So this is page 11 on the electronic copy of the report. So this deals with a number of different licences and fees associated with those licences. You will see there are two recommendations. One is to note the content of the report and revised fees are set out within Appendix 1. And the second element is to consider and debate those proposals and then following that determine whether to agree the fees with or without the modification. And what I'm going to propose is that when you come to making that decision on that recommendation, is you initially consider them en bloc. So rather than dealing with each one individually, determine whether or not you can agree to all of the increases en bloc. If not, they will then be dealt with on an individual basis. In terms of the report itself, it's fairly short and self-explanatory. We would, as a local authority, ordinarily seek to look at fees probably on an annual basis. It's 2019 since we last looked at these fees, and that was predominantly because of COVID and the impact on the sector. When it comes to our fees, again, what we would do and what we have done on this particular occasion is we try to actually calculate what the cost is of delivering that particular service or that licence. So whilst in the report it says there is an increase of about 9%, that is what we believe, following consultation between licensing officers and finance, what the increase should be to ensure cost recovery for carrying that activity out on behalf of those seeking the licences. As I said previously, we do recognise that there are a number of pressures on business at the moment, whether that's still post-recovery from COVID or in terms of the current cost of living crisis. But again, as you'll appreciate, we as a local authority are impacted in the same way. I think when this report was written, CPI was probably at 10.1%. So we are experiencing significant pressures within the local authority ourselves. So whilst we recognise the pressures on business from cost of living, it is still, I would suggest, appropriate to consider the current fees and determine whether or not they should be increased to reflect cost of recovery in this year. So the report is there for you to look at. Appendix A sets out the initial fee, when it was last reviewed, and the actual proposed fee. Some of those fee increases are quite modest, but I think the largest fee, just in case anybody is wondering, will probably be that for dangerous wild animals, which will rise from £116 to £250. And again, that's purely and simply a reflection on the amount of work that has to be done. But you'll also note that there are a number of these licences which haven't been increased for a considerable period of time. So on that, Chair, I'll pass back to yourself.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the floor? Councillor Sesford.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. If I could just clarify what you just said there, Phil, about the dangerous wild animals. You said the price was to what?
So Appendix 1, dangerous wild current cost of licence is £116. That was set in August 2015, and that would rise to £250. What I would say, and this is with dangerous wild animal licences, often what has to be done is a significant amount of research with regard to the actual animal itself, the control measures, the storage requirements, etc., etc. So unlike if you're operating, let's say, a breeding and boarding establishment where we have set conditions, set approach, with many of the dangerous wild animals, you have to start afresh and look at it from scratch in terms of what the implications would be. And it's that research element which probably takes us the time, which is why there is such an increase in the cost.
because that's like 115% increase, that one, on that particular one. And it says in the report that the price rises are circa 9%. Well, actually, in fact, nothing's 9%. It's between 10 and 10.9%. So, but yeah, I did notice that one was a bit. I mean, what's significantly changed since 3 years ago? Oh, sorry, what was omitted 3 years ago that's led to an increase of 115% for the dangerous wild animals? Because obviously must be something significant
I think on that one,
extra now as it was 3 years ago.
I think on that one, if you notice the asterisk.
Well, I know, but if you notice there's 1 3 above, a zoo licence has an asterisk as well, and that's only gone up, 10%. So,
But with dangerous wild animals, that's more of a tricky thing to deal with, presumably, vets-wise.
I would have thought dangerous wild animals were pretty tricky 3 years ago as well, though.
Well, as you notice above, one species hasn't gone up that much, gone £15, whereas 2 to 5 species plus has gone up a lot more. And I presume that'll be the reasoning.
Well, zoo licence 10%, 2 to 5 species 10.18%, 6 plus species 10%, dangerous wild animals 115%.
So the comment I would make in response to that, Councillor Sesford, is what we've tried to do is we've reviewed the actual cost of delivering that in association with licensing and finance. It is more likely than not that the cost we had back in 2015 was too low. But as I say, the intention is that this should be a cost recovery exercise through a ring-fence budget. So that's what we would say is the true cost. I appreciate it's a significant increase. I'm not going to dispute that. But I would still say that is what we would estimate cost recovery to be.
Yeah, I understand you're doing cost recovery, and that's fine, because that's what was voted on the last meeting we had, and that's absolutely fine. I was just wondering if there'd been something come in, like a new regulation that meant you had to add something extra to it, which is added to this cost, rather than what was in place 3 years ago. So we must have been well underfunded 3 years ago then. Thank you very much.
Right, any more questions? Councillor, can't see your name.
The Dangerous Wild Animals Act actually contains a schedule of dangerous wild animals. I've just been informed by Tasman that the alligator has passed away. Was the crocodile?
Dwarf crocodile.
Dwarf crocodile has passed away. But it is anything, basically, I suppose, the easiest way to answer the question, it's anything which is a not normally domesticated animal within this country. So I think ostriches would have been, historically, and there was quite a movement with having ostriches. And if you really need to know the detail of ostriches, a breeding group is 3, all the research we did on ostriches. But it is anything and everything which is not normally seen as a domesticated animal within this country.
Do you know where they are, what they are?
Oh, yeah.
What have we got?
We've got
they are very few and far between the licences we do for dangerous wild animals. In the past, we've had a wolf dog. We've had cats that are not domestic cats. So not quite a tiger, but not your domestic cat. I can't comment on that one.
We've got Top Cat there.
I say the simple answer is those animals which are not normally domesticated, but it can be anything and everything. It's quite surprising what some people wish to have as a pet or have as a, yes.
What kind of wild animal is the Northumberland? How many is the Northumberland?
Well, as Tasman says, we will have very few actually people licensed for dangerous wild animals, but again it will fluctuate. I mean, ostriches were quite popular at one particular point in time, and everybody seemed to want a breeding group of ostriches.
So we don't have a record of what animals we have.
We will do,
yes.
yeah.
Where's the list? What are
We just can't recite it here in the meeting, but we could pull together a list if it was requested by members. We could do that. We just can't recite it off memory today.
Okay,
Yeah.
accept that.
I think they're cats.
feral cats.
In the past, I know there was an ostrich farm at Allendale, for instance. Sorry?
There is a butcher. A few of them about cats.
Councillor Wallace?
We had a vulture and escaped.
Is that not in the
Councillor Wallace?
Thanks, Chair. I think while you've been answering Councillor Parry, I've answered myself. My question was going to be, when you talk about dangerous wild animals, are you really referring to animals that aren't kept by a singular person, for example, in their home? However, I'm aware at Swarland where there's rears, which are like ostriches. In Camas, there's ostriches and rears. But I was thinking perhaps Northumberland Zoo. Is that what you're talking about? For example, snow leopards. They're not the sort of things you would keep at home. And anyone who's had the good fortune to visit that zoo will see the type of animals that's on display there. I just wondered if that's where you would find dangerous wild animals.
There's a distinction between those that are viewed by the public in our zoos and those are just kept as pets. So the ones that are kept as pets would be dangerous, classed as dangerous wild animals.
So if I give an example, the western grey, eastern grey and red kangaroo, Tasmanian devil, most primates, all bears, camels, elephants, eared seals, don't know if that means non-eared seals aren't actually, the aardvark, fossa, giant armadillo, giant anteater, so it's anything of that ilk. But I say the key thing, as Tasman says, when you're looking at zoos, that they are specifically for viewing purpose of the public, this is a pet, for want of a better expression, in domestic premises. But yes, it's many and varied. But yeah, the viviparina is, except the small Indian civet. True seals are, except the common seal or grey seal. I'm not really sure what they do. And this is part of the issue. When you're reading this and you say, well, what's a true seal compared to this? This is where the research comes in about actually what exactly is the animal, what's the risk from the animal, but more importantly, what's the welfare needs for that particular animal. So you've got to look at the welfare needs, but you've also got then the public safety element. So if somebody's going to have a seal, I'm probably fairly sure what a seal might need, and probably fairly sure about what a risk might be for a seal. If you then look at the other end of the scale, like a large cat, the risk to public safety is going to be far greater. So again, there's going to be additional controls. That's where the cost will come in for us. It's actually then looking at each one on an individual basis and then deciding what is the appropriate welfare and what's the appropriate storage arrangements for that animal.
Thank you. Any more questions? Right. Do you agree we take this on block? Thank you. Councillor Parry proposed, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. I was just about to ask that. Any debate on the actual prices, or are we satisfied with the rises? No? We go straight to the vote then, please. All those in favour?
Chair,
Unanimous.
Oh, sorry, yes, unanimous.
Thank you.
Chair,
Yeah, do you agree to that proposal? It comes into fruition the 1st of January. Need a proposal, seconder?
technically, yes. Yeah.
Proposer, please, and seconder. Councillor Chicken, Councillor Sesford, second. Right, we'll go on to the next item agenda, which is report of the Hackney carriage and private hire licensing fees.
Thank you.
Philip?
Before I present this report, what I'm conscious of is that when the report's being sent yourselves in hard copy format, the actual consultation responses are probably slightly challenging to read. Now, some members may have actually looked at it online and actually had the opportunity to read it. So in advance of this, discuss this with the chair. We do have a copy of the actual responses in an A3 format. So I think the question would be whether or not people have had the opportunity to read the consultation responses online, where obviously they can be read clearly, or whether they need to see the consultation responses in hard copy. And again, I think the proposal would be, if you wish to see them as hard copy, we can circulate, and again, default to the chair here and legal officer as to whether or not there'll be an adjournment to give you the time to actually look at those.
Do you wish hard copies? Or would have to temporarily adjourn. You know, you can look at it while we debate it if you want. Okay?
If I can just comment.
Yeah.
If I can just comment, I think it is important because obviously one of the things you're being requested to do as a recommendation is to consider and debate the proposals. So you need to be confident that you've actually had the opportunity to look at the proposal. You see, you may have done this outside of the meeting online. I'm just conscious when you look at the report back, you can't do that. That's why we printed them off here this afternoon. But as long as you're confident that when you enter that stage of the process, you've had the opportunity to consider and debate them.
If I can just clarify, Chair, can I just clarify, is everyone happy that they've already read the comments that have been submitted by the trade? Or does anyone want an opportunity to have another read of a larger copy of it?
I think it might be safer just
Sorry,
to
I
have
think Councillor Swinburne.
I would prefer an opportunity to read it because I wasn't even sure what it was, to be fair, on the back
I
page.
was going to say, I think it's going to be safer to have just a short adjournment and wing through it yourselves. Right. Sorry about that. Have you read and digested? Are there any questions regarding that? Councillor Sesford?
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to check on there doesn't seem to be anything in here about how much they put it up by, so I worked it out, and I just wonder what the rationale behind these various increases are, because they go from, like, say, a 5 years operator licence, which stays the same, so that's 0% increase, to something like the Hackney carriage for vehicles using greener fuels, which was up 18.1%. And greener fuels as well. I mean, I remember we debated that last time, and so there doesn't seem to be any rationale between the different price increases here, you know, not like 5%, or 7% or 10%.
I've slightly jumped the gun on this one. Really, Phil should have given a report on it. So
Well,
that might answer your question. Sorry.
Well, I might well do. So now what you know what to say now, Phil.
Exactly. my apologies.
So in terms of the report itself, you will see there are 3 recommendations set out in the report. That's obviously note the content of the report and the revised fees is set out within the Appendix 1. Again, it's to consider and debate the proposals, and then following which determine whether to agree the fees with or without modification. So again, I would suggest to the committee you may wish to consider that en bloc initially, and if not, then on an individual basis. You will also note that because of a typographical error in the consultation documents, we are not proceeding with the proposed fees for the 5-year operator's licence. That will stay as is until we do a fresh consultation or due to an error in the actual consultation public notice. There is then a request that if you agree to change the fees, that's with or without modifications, to then set the date upon which that will come into effect. And in truth, the only key date to note is that it must be on or before the 8th of February, and that comes back to how the legislation is crafted in terms of the consultation you must do and then the decision you must make. So they're the recommendations. In terms of the report itself, you will recall this originally came to the Licence and Regulatory Committee from this committee to then undertake the formal consultation, which has been undertaken in accordance with the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act, Section 70. And as part of that statutory process, you have to place an advert in local newspapers, certainly in the area. We did that, but in addition to that, we also emailed or sent an email out to over 1,000 licence holders, alerting them to the actual proposed increases and invited on comments on the proposal. That consultation exercise, and again in accordance with statute, ran till the 8th of December, and the responses are as you've seen them today. Again, I think it's worthy to note that we haven't seen an increase in many of these fees since 2018. Again, that was partly due to the impact of COVID and other matters, but some of them actually dated back to 2015. Again, it was a conscious decision not to increase fees during COVID because of the impact on the sector and the trade. But there was, as you're aware, some support from Northumberland County Council to the sector at that particular point in time as well, so there was support. I don't think it comes as any great surprise that with a consultation of this nature that there isn't a lot of support from the trade, but I don't think I'm surprised at that. And they will quote, or I'm paraphrasing here, when you read the consultation comments, there are probably three main reasons why the trade are opposed to any sort of fee increase. That is staffing, cost of living, and the 7% increase that was awarded to the trade for the tariff itself. If I can just talk to each of those in turn, if you don't mind. In terms of the 7% increase that was awarded by committee earlier this year, I think the point I would highlight, that was an increase across all of their journeys and tariffs, whereas this is a single increase onto the licence fee itself. So it's not a multiple, it is a one-off on the licence fee. And I say that sat at about 7%. That was 7% for the trade. The other thing I would highlight, it was agreed also when the tariff was increased, was that we would bring the tariff back in March of next year, 2023. So whilst we've had an increase in the tariff of about 7%, yes, we're now proposing a fee increase. It is also proposed that the actual tariff will come back to this committee in March of 2023 as well. The other comment which comes through quite strongly is cost of living. And I think we all know that has an impact upon everybody. I think when we looked at the tariff, one of the major issues and major concerns for the trade was the cost of fuel, etc. But again, what we are seeing, I think, is a reduction generally in fuel costs at the moment. It seems to be quite dramatic on some days of the week, especially with unleaded. It seems to drop quite significantly and rises back up again. So I think there's definitely a net reduction overall, but it is still fluctuating. So cost of living, yes, I think is accepted, is an impact on the trade. But as in the case of the previous licences we discussed, those costs are also being borne by the local authority as well. So the CPI rate, etc., the actual utility costs, staffing costs have all gone up for the local authority. So whilst accepting there is a cost of living impact on the trade, that is equally applied to Northumberland County Council. In terms of the early question from Councillor Sessford, in terms of why are the sort of different rates, well, again, what we've tried to do is reflect what we believe is the true cost of processing a particular licence in a particular way. It would have been easy to say, well, we'll apply a 7% or a 10%, whatever the figure is. That wouldn't have been the correct way to do it because it should be on a cost recovery basis for the service that you perform. That's why you will see different rates in there. The other comment I would make, there's quite a lot of comment in the report about staffing, quality of service. I think it is true to say we have struggled within the licensing service for the last 18 months or so. And again, that's been a combination of recent reasons. Yes, we had the transition from office-based work into COVID back in 2020. We actually put a lot of effort into that, and we've moved most of our application processes online. So we've actually simplified that process for the trade, so there's less public interaction. So we've made improvements to service delivery. We've also, though, seen across this last sort of 2 years quite a significant churn in staffing and some sickness issues within staffing. We also recognised, I think, that the actual model we had for licensing was probably not the most appropriate in terms of actually providing a service to the customer. Historically, what we had was a homogenous team which basically just dealt with all licences. So whether that be Licensing Act, premises licences, taxi licences, dangerous wild animals, everybody dealt with everything. What we have subsequently done is we've actually created two teams, one of which is predominantly dealing with taxis and taxi licensing, the other is dealing with premises licensing. So that has, in one way, allowed sort of people to actually specialise within those particular licences and give greater concentration and focus to them. It has had the net effect, also, potentially taking away some of the variation to what people do, because they're now dealing with far fewer licences, as it were. But we took that decision at the time we also reinvested in the staff and reinvested in the service. So we put an additional 2 members of staff into the licensing service at that time and created that new structure. I think it's probably true to say, up until very recently, we've never operated that full structure at full capacity through churn in staff or absence or otherwise. We're now at a point where I think, touch wood, we have got virtually full staffing, or will have, but it has been a challenge for us. And yes, I recognise when the trade will say, well, just bring more staff in. Actually, to simply bring more staff in is quite challenging, because you can't bring somebody into a licensing service and say, do it. There's a degree of training they've got to be given, etc., etc. And the whole recruitment process for us probably takes from start to finish about 3 months. So by the time you place an advert, you interview, you offer, somebody who does a notice period, it's about a 3-month period, so there's always a lag in the system. What we did recognise, though, is that it wasn't the best service that we could offer, so we did actually then look at providing additional overtime for staff, and that we've been doing now for several months. But I think as we sit here today, in terms of the numbers of applications which are awaiting processing, so that's numbers in the system we haven't looked at, you're probably looking at less than 20. And I think, I keep looking at Tasman here because she'll either nod or kick me or one or the other, probably the oldest probably dates back to about mid-December, so 12th of December or something like that. So we're not sitting here today with a huge backlog of undetermined applications. It's actually relatively few. Are there some which may be at risk of expiry? That is always a possibility, because there is nothing in the legislation which says that somebody must apply 28 days in advance of a licence expiring. So we have got examples where somebody will actually literally apply for a licence the day before it expires. But as things stand, I think we're in a reasonably good position. We've got full staffing complement. The new structure hopefully will start to have a benefit now, but we are not sitting here with a large volume of applications which are awaiting processing. It is a relatively small number, and they should be addressed, I would have thought, subject to staffing over the Christmas period. That's how we'll deal with that. So I take the point that's been made about staffing, but we'd already recognised that and put in some measures to actually address that. I think the final comment I'll make, and I'm not trying to be confrontational, I'm not trying to be emotive here or otherwise. I think when you look at this consultation and the level of responses, and you look at what we've actually done, i.e. gone through the formal consultation process and sent an email out to people, it is slightly disappointing that we've got 48 consultation responses in total. Now, I'm not going to pass any view on whether that's lack of interest, lack of support, what is it, but it is slightly disappointing when you go through this exercise, you send the emails out, etc., and we're basically talking about 48 responses to a consultation exercise. So where we stand today, you've got the proposed fees based upon cost recovery, etc., etc. Legislation does require us to make a decision in terms of whether or not to agree those fees and charges with or without change or otherwise, and then agree the date upon which they come into effect. So I think that is the report. I'm happy to take any questions from that, Chair.
Thank you. I've got one question or a couple of questions actually. On licence renewal, do we send out reminders, or would it not be financially viable for us to do so?
We used to do it. Again, there is nothing in the legislation which says we should. We used to do it, but we were often criticised if you missed one person or missed two people. So we took a decision many years ago, that as this is a licence to operate a business, it is the responsibility of the business proprietor to actually make an application for a licence.
And is that on the licence? Like the reminder's up to yourselves, it's up to you to
Yes.
remember to renew the licence?
Yeah.
Right, great. Councillor Sesford?
Yeah, just following on from what I said before, I mean, obviously, Phil's covered a lot of what I said, which you would expect. But I remember the meeting we discussed this, I mentioned about sort of maybe we should have a period of stability and review it again later, because, you know, interest rates are going up, petrol prices are going up, then they might come down in this, that, those, rather than up and down. However, it is what we've got here. you're talking about cost recovery. I mean, I'm working on the principle that you're going to wipe your hands or whatever the expression is, and we're not making any profit here. We're covering our costs. That is it. It also seems a little bit like the last one. Or is it a bit like, I'll ask the question. Is it a bit like the last one where we're putting some proposals in which are correcting maybe things that weren't quite right 3 years ago?
I mean, yeah, it is ultimately cost recovery. I think we were talking about this outside. I think the total income that this will generate, and you say that's income to actually support the service, is about £13,000. That's, if you apply this for a whole year, it's about £13,000. We actually looked the other day at our consumables, and I'm looking at Darren now more than anything. So we will have a consumables budget, and I'm trying to recall, Darren, did we say that I think we were already £6,000 overspent on our annual consumables budget? And that, in the main, is directly attributable to the actual inflationary pressures that we're seeing within materials.
It'll be just over 6,000 in the year.
Sorry. Yeah.
So far.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. Two things. One, if I can just go to the responses, I know it's a low number, but I'm sure everyone in this room will have heard from constituents, why bother, it's a done deal. The amount of times you hear that, not just licensing, planning's a big one where you tend to hear that. And I'll just draw your attention to response 10, the last line, but this will probably be ignored anyway, and you will do what you want as always, so why waste the time asking us? That's the perception that we pick up from residents, from businesses, etc. So on that basis, and given other consultations being low as well, I think that's quite a reason that we need to bear in mind as to why responses are low. But what I will say is, last time I did ask the proposer for the fees if they would incorporate a discount for greener fuels, and it was rejected. But when you look at the value of the increases, £15 for the private or Hackney carriage vehicle licence for vehicles, that's the highest increase, bar the greener fuels, of that whole list, and that's £15. £37 increase for those using greener fuels. Now, we want to be climate change champions. We want to encourage greener fuels, more electric vehicles, etc. Yet we're really penalising those who do have greener fuels. £37 increase is way more than any of the other increases on that list of fees. The second highest is £15. We're going to penalise £37 for something we're trying to encourage, and we're trying to move people into greener vehicles. We even have one of the consultation responses saying they had an electric vehicle, but because of the costs involved, they've gone back to what's termed as an ICE vehicle, an internal combustion engine, because the costs were just being too great to run the electric vehicles. Now, it was just mentioned, it was Phil said, how fuel costs have come down. Electricity costs haven't. They've gone sky high. They've rocketed. All of the charging points, generally, have gone sky high as well. So to charge your vehicle externally, away from home, away from whatever tariffs you might have been able to get from your supplier, is horrendous at the moment. So we are pushing our taxi drivers away from greener vehicles by not giving them that discount. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think the obvious comment to make is that from a practical point of view, procedural point of view, it will take us the same time and officer effort to process an application for a green fueled vehicle or a non-green fueled vehicle. And that's why they will come out at the same cost, because the officer time, the cost of doing it will be the same. And actually, if we were to reduce one and let's say artificially hike another one up to counterbalance, then all we're doing is cross-subsidising, we're penalising another part of the trade and cross-subsidise another part of the trade. But, you know, that is what we think it costs us to actually process it. All the points you make in terms of, you know, fuel costs, electricity costs are valid, etc., and I'm not saying they're not. But when you look at this from a purely, what does it cost Northumberland County Council to receive, process and grant that licence, it is no different to whether it be with a greener fuel or not.
Yeah.
Thank you. I completely understand and appreciate that. I do. But that's a very black and white view. And when we are trying to, you know, be climate change champions, we're trying to encourage more greener fuels, we're trying to encourage a lower carbon footprint, surely all of these should be working together, not just looking at something and saying, oh, well, that's the cost of process, it's black and white, that's what we're going to do. Surely we should be kind of bringing everything in, looking at the bigger picture with something like this. So to give a discount, I mean, it doesn't have to be a massive discount, but just that discount to recognise that we are encouraging the use of greener fuels has got to be beneficial. Thank you, Chair.
You put a very good argument forward, but as Phil says, it's a cost exercise to you know, get your costs back. And it's been costing in the past 226, and there was a discount down to 204 for electric, and now they're both the same. So, like for like, just a cost recovery, basically. But you do put a good argument forward, mind about it, but it's not good running at a loss. Councillor Wallace?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's a good argument, and it was a good argument last time we had it as well, and it was well discussed the last time. I don't personally think 22 quid would make me spend £22,000 on an electric vehicle extra. But that's a personal choice. I think we should be applauded for having supported those turning to greener vehicles over the years. But the reality is, when I asked the question in the last meeting, there isn't as many of those electric vehicles on the road as what we think there is. That's the real world, Chair. But my question is quite simple. I thought Phil gave a very good... it was reassuring to hear that in the middle of this month that there's only a small number of applications to be determined, because that's important. That's very important. The consultation period started October the 26th. And I draw members' attention to number 25, who raises the point as late as October the 26th that he couldn't get a test for his vehicle. Now, I don't know this person, but I assume that every member in this room realises that proposed fee of £241 includes the testing of your vehicle. It doesn't mean to say it's an administration exercise. You take your vehicle. It doesn't. That's additional. So this isn't a total amount of what anyone pays to put a vehicle on the road.
No, the cost of the testing is separate, and that's paid direct to the garage who do the testing rather than to ourselves.
Thank you. Do you think
It's independent.
Do you think it's important that members should be aware of that or not? That there's additional costs to put the vehicle on the road. I mean, at one time it did. Obviously, it doesn't now. And where I'm concerned, I'll be honest with you, after years in the taxi trade, I find it's changing. And that's why I don't declare an interest, because I haven't been involved for such a long time. But are we all, as members, really aware of what these costs are that members incur? I know it's not our responsibility. It's not our responsibility about the policy of green vehicles. But what we do know is a responsible organisation. We ensure that the members have medicals. And if you think these costs are high, have a look at the cost of a medical for a driver for a vehicle. Have a look at the cost of a driver over the age of 60 who has to have that annually. I don't know if that's still the case. I think one thing we should learn from this meeting, Chair, is members, in my opinion, would like more information as to what taxi owners and drivers actually spend to put that vehicle on the road for our public to get into. Because I was under the impression that £241 included the test fee. Obviously it doesn't, and I did see references on a number of occasions of £55. So can I ask, and I'm sorry to keep changing the question, if it fails, is there a retest fee?
So, in terms of, I think the holistic question there, is it important that members understand the cost of running a taxi? I would agree with you. Yes, I would. And if that's an omission from the report, I apologise for that. But again, I'll just bring this back. What we are talking about here is the part of the process that we, in licence, are responsible for. So when you look at the medical, and it's quite right, you have an initial medical, which will run from, is it 21? I think up to 60. Then it's, so you've got an issue, sorry, 45, then it's 5-year chunks, etc., etc. That cost will be determined by the medical practitioner who provides it, so we don't set that. And again, in terms of the MOT inspection fee, that will be determined by the inspection test, which will be, in this case, Northumberland County Council. In terms of whether or not there's a retest, it will ultimately depend upon how significant the fail was. Yeah. If it is something quite basic, I would suggest, and I'm only saying I would suggest not, because it's not my service, but if it's a significant fail, yes, there will be a retest charge as well for them. But those elements in terms of the test, the medical, the DBS, they're all outside of our control. This is about the process we perform, and it's about what we believe is the cost recovery for that service with a non-profit element.
Thanks, Chair. I cannot disagree with one word that's been said, but we do spend time talking about how much unleaded fuel is, how much electric is, and yet we say we shouldn't be talking about DBS or doctor's fees. I think it's all part and parcel, Chair. I have to say, I support the principle of this covering the costs. I do, 100%. But I think the word we need more than anything else is fairness. To show that there's fairness of how we've come to that decision. And without all the information at hand, to know how much it costs for that person to get behind that wheel, it's difficult to make that decision. Thank you for allowing me the time to go through that, Chair.
Yeah, no problem. You're entitled to. All I can sort of reflect is what Phil said, and we're looking at our recovery costs, not the additional recovery costs not the payments that applicants have to make to get the licence, be it medical, MOT, etc. This is just to actually have our recovery costs of the licence or licences. Yeah.
It is a challenging one. It's difficult because there's probably other costs that you haven't mentioned, insurance, etc., etc. But if you go back to the license, well, no, even if you think about some of those licenses, so you're right, we've talked about some of the consumable elements because they were quite in the public eye at the time in terms of cost of living crisis. But I think the question is, how far do you go? So if you're a private hire operator, do you want to know the cost of the actual national non-domestic rate, heat, light, fuel bills for that building as well? Because that's the cost of doing it. If it's a zoo, do you want to know all the costs of running the zoo, the animal feed and everything else? That there is a point, and I take the point that's been made, but there is a point at which you have to say, well, there is a conscious decision being made by somebody here that is the livelihood they wish to pursue, whether that be a taxi driver, whatever. And there are certain costs that they're going to have to accept, but that's no different for anybody who sets up in business and wants to run from the high street or otherwise. That has been an informed and conscious decision that they are satisfied by making that degree of investment financially, and I think importantly for the trade, making that degree of personal investment. By that I mean time and everything else. That is their chosen profession, because they believe it will afford them an income that can support their family, as it were. So I do take the point, but I think it's very difficult to say, right, that is the cost, because for some business it will be it's beyond our ability to actually capture that and actually say that's the true cost of doing that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bainan.
Thanks, Chair. We are a business ourselves, and we're running this service really at a loss. And to disagree slightly with the last two speakers, I think if it was my business and there was 1,000 emails sent out and there was only 48 responses, and I know what Julie was saying, that a lot of people were saying, oh, well, it's a done deal, but that shouldn't stop you sending objections in, and a 4.7 return is really pretty poor. And on the point of what Councillor Wallace was saying, when we set the rates, we don't put a list of what business costs are, the gas, lighting, heating, insuring their vehicles, delivery vehicles, tax, etc. So it's how far do you go with that list. It's unfortunate we've got to put these prices up, but we've got to look at the bottom line, unfortunately, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Ball. Chicken, sorry.
Thank you, yeah. We had 48 responses out of 1,000. That is higher than we had when we were putting up the set rate for fares. Generally speaking, people write in to complain. They don't write in to agree with something. So if they agree with it, quite often they just don't bother to write in. I think a lot of these taxi drivers will be expecting to have a rise go. This hasn't been reviewed in some time. The cost of everything is going up. So I would expect that taxi drivers are expecting this to go up in line with inflation, in line with the cost of living per se. If we didn't put this up, the cost, the initial cost that is now being incurred would have to be absorbed somewhere else. I take it we have looked at everywhere else that could have been absorbed, and this is the only option, bar putting everybody's council tax up, which we know cannot be afforded across Northumberland, and they shouldn't be taking on the responsibility of one single business when every business, every industry, every household is having to absorb the costs of living and of business. It wouldn't be right that one service or one business does not have to absorb those costs, but we do put it onto everybody else. Is there another way of looking at this, or is this the only way that we can do this? Because as far as I can see, this is justified, but I'm not in the full know-how. I would just like to know if we have explored every other option, and the only other option is to put it onto the general Joe public in their council tax. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think, as we know, the council will take its budget forward in February, and obviously what all service directors are actually asked to do is to look at the cost of delivering their service. Can we make efficiencies? Can we make savings, etc., etc.? And one of the questions will be, can we increase income as well? I can't stress enough, this is not about increasing income for the purpose of surplus and profit. This is about increasing income to cover the cost of delivering the service in the first instance. And it would be fundamentally wrong for the council to accept, not accept an increase in the fees and charges, but to then cross-subsidise by another means, either through council tax or otherwise. It is, the law would expect that this is provided as a cost recovery ring-fence budget, and that's how it's been approached.
Yeah, there's no point robbing Peter to pay Paul. Councillor Swinbank.
Thank you, Chair. We've consulted obviously on these fees. What I want to ask, because I think we're still at the question stage, is does that mean we can't pass something today which is greater than these figures? Would we have to go back to reconsultation to do that? That's my question.
I could hear Tasman breathing in there. If you,
it's called passing the buck.
What the actual recommendation says to you is, after the consultation, it's whether or not you agree the fees with or without modification. Now, I'd need to read the Act, which I can do very quickly, but my recollection of the Act is without modification does not mean it has to be reduced. It just says without modification, because the legislation will not say that, it will not assume that the objection or the consultation response will be negative, i.e. it's seeking a reduction. You could, in theory, have a consultation response which says it should be higher. So the legislation would afford you both to actually, from that proposed fee, either reduce it or increase it, should you wish to do so.
I think a point that you need to take on board is something that Phil has mentioned several times, that this is cost recovery. So that, you know, the whole process is that our costs should be recovered. That is the sum that the department have come to. So I don't really see how you could be able to justify in terms of cost recovery. There shouldn't be any profit essentially made from the fees. So I'm not sure how you would be able to justify, unless you wanted a whole new look at the actual cost of delivering the service. I don't know how you would kind of propose
the reason I'm asking the question is because there's been discussion with regard to the incentive or not for greener fuels. So my question is, if we were to say put the increase for greener fuels to the average of the rest of the increases, then obviously we would be below making our costs back unless we raised one or more of the other fees. That's why I'm asking the question.
I don't think you can do that. So whilst you would have a taxi licensing account where this money will sit, it is still the case that what you are charging your customer for is the cost of processing their application. So if you're a Hackney carriage driver, you are processing their application, and you shouldn't be artificially increasing the cost of that licence to cross-subsidise another licence. Yes, holistically, you're looking at the overall taxi licensing account, but you are still looking at each individual licence in isolation, as it were, to say what is the cost of us doing that activity.
So just to be clear, we could actually reduce one of these figures if we wanted to, if we agreed to as a committee, without having to go back to reconsultation. That's my question.
I mean, the simple answer to that question is yes, because the point of today, had we run the consultation exercise and there had been no comments at all, then the fees would have come into effect as per the consultation. It would have come into effect the day after the consultation closed. This process is only triggered because people have made a consultation response. And that comes back to that key question of, do you wish to approve on the basis of the consultation figures with or without modification? That's what you have to determine today as to whether or not you wish to modify or not, or leave as they were. Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed, but there's actually one of the consultees has agreed with the fees going up, just for the record. I thought we were going to get away with it without them, but Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you very much, Chair. Totally get the presentation and agree with it around cost recovery. Yes, it is a business, but I think we need to maybe have a smaller deep dive into this. I think it's been touched on by various councillors that this is a business. But apart from that, it's a service. Now, we have got trains, buses, you know, the trains are being reduced and the times, the buses are being rerouted. Now, this is the third level of transport for a lot of people. So coming back to Councillor Wallace's point, where he was surprised about MOTs and whatever, I think that there should be a special help there and an understanding from this group to all taxi drivers of the restraints and the problems that they've got. You know, we can pick various communities in the southeast part of Northumberland, which is the highest density of population. In Lymouth, Camas, and you can go on. They heavily rely, and sometimes can't afford taxis, but they rely on it. So when that happens, I think an element of support and understanding of the restraints that the taxi drivers have got would be beneficial for future conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that comment. Are there any other questions, comments? Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, my apologies, I shut off on so many tangents and questions before. I had a note of one question only and I shut off from it. And it was on number 25. Someone wrote in and said they couldn't get a test date. Now that was, the consultation started October the 26th. Phil informed us, and I do not doubt it for one moment, very small number of applications still to be resolved. So in a small period of time, since October 26th, someone says they cannot get a test date. So the question is that true? Because he says testers are still operating from home. You can never test a vehicle at somebody's home. And the second thing is that person allowed to work with a vehicle that should have been tested and isn't tested?
So I think we're talking two different things here. So, no. So what I'm referring to in terms of those applications which we are yet to process, they are the applications that are with us. What this person is referring to, I think, is the ability to book a car in for a test at a testing station. But obviously what we would expect, along with the application, is proof that it has passed its MOT certificate. But I think that's what that's referring to. The comment, as you say, because I remember looking at that in terms of, as you say, that the testers working from home, etc. That no, our testing stations are still operating as our testing stations, but that's what that's referring to. What I'm specifically referring to are what we would believe to be, and I'm going to say believe to be, a duly made application. So when somebody applies to us, we would expect to have all of the bits of an application. The first stage in processing will be to go through and make sure it's duly made. Have we got all the bits, yes or no? And then we'll process it. That, I think, is talking about something else.
So thank you. So the question rephrased. Are applicants having difficulties getting a vehicle tested? Sorry, not applicants. Current owners renewing their licenses. Increased prices as well.
I think, and we've probably heard this before in I was going to say in this chamber, whether it be in this chamber or in this meeting, that there has been challenge to to the approach we adopt with testing at the moment. And again, there's been colleagues from Berwick who've raised this before, because there isn't a local station in Berwick. I couldn't sit here today and say with any confidence yes or no to that question, because it's not my part of the service. What I will say is that all we would ask as a licensing service is that people, when they are seeking to renew, do so in good time. Now, I can quote you examples where you have people who have it in the diary, have it as a reminder on the phone, and you will get an application 28 days in advance. There is not a problem with that. I can equally quote examples where the application will come in the day before, and the only person that's failed is the county council for not being able to get a test in on that day to get the vehicle application processed. So like all of these things, there will be different circumstances with different outcomes. And I say, unfortunately, legislation does not require an applicant to apply so far in advance. They just have to apply. In terms of your question, would you or would we see the licenses continuing or otherwise? Again, I think it depends. If somebody's going to apply to us the day before, it's going to be very difficult for us to process an application, and it may well be that we can't do so. If we believe the error was on our behalf and we were preventing somebody from operating, we would look at that and, we may have to make a decision on that. I'm not going to say what that decision will be, because it may well depend upon merit. But I think, again, it's each. I suppose the simple answer is we would consider each one on merit. But somebody who leaves at the last minute, we're not probably going to be able to continue with a licence.
Councillor Sharp.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to speak on this matter because it's an issue which I think all the 30 years I've been on licence committees, you know, we always seem to have a long discussion on something which should be fairly straightforward. But there's two issues. The point Councillor Wallace brings up could be come back as a report to a future meeting, because it is an issue in the north, and it's an issue with the number of testing stations we have, and I think that maybe should come back for a future debate. That isn't really part of what we're discussing today. That's a separate issue. But there is an issue in the north, and it's an issue which I think we should bring back a further report for discussion at another date, because there's no doubt that is an issue. So we can't hide away from that. That is an issue. The issue today, you know, I'm totally with everybody that, you know, we've got to put the fees up, you know, by sort of 10%. The real issue here, there's two issues. One is we haven't done them since 2018, and that is one of the key problems today, is that it's 4 years ago since we've reviewed this. And obviously wages and other costs have increased a lot over the last 4 years. So there's no doubt we should be putting it up. My only sort of question is this, is that when we put the fee down by 10% for vehicles using greener fuels, 226 and 224, I acknowledge the cost of preparing the licence is exactly the same. But I also feel that we've had a lot of policy conferences lately as members about the electric car, electric charge, zero, to everything else, you know, and whether it's right to increase that, is, although I appreciate the cost of doing it is exactly the same, I can see that, but we made a decision 3-4 years ago to greener cars being 10% less than normal licences, and we're not really, you know, apart from what Councillor Foster said, and I appreciate what she said on that, you know, maybe we ought to think a little bit in the bigger picture here. Maybe we should be putting that at 235 or whatever it is. But what my question is how many greener cars do we have, and what is the actual impact financially to this authority if we're going to reduce that a little bit? Because that is one of our priorities as a council.
It might take a while to get the result on that one. Is that possible?
We would need a little, we'd have to run a report to see what the current...
I don't think we can give the answer here and now. The thing I would come back to is, and I understand, and this is the importance of a democracy in the debate, this is not about profit and surplus. This is about delivering a service. And actually, as I say, when we work this out, it probably equates to about, when you apply all of those to all the licence we've got, it equates to about £13,000 additional income. And as Darren said, we're already looking just on one area of consumables with potentially a £6,000 overspend in year. And that is, you know, from our perspective, a direct impact because of inflation and other pressures. And when you then look at, you know, what it costs us to heat, light, provide power to our buildings, those costs have gone up as well. Staffing costs have gone up again. I can't stress enough that this is not about generating tens of thousands of pounds. It's actually, in the scheme of things, a relatively small total increase in terms of the budget itself. I think it's probably unfair to expect Tasman well, especially when that's just spinning around like the circle of doom and going nowhere.
I think I'd go back to what Councillor Wallace said actually about electric car, the charging, not the charging, the fees for electric cars and combustion engines. And would he get rid of his his combustion engine for a less fee for an electric car costing £20,000 more than a normal car? I call it a normal car. So there's arguments both ways. But if we're just recovering costs, then to me it's a no-brainer. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to put a motion forward because I think it's been a lot of questions put through today. I'd like to propose to move the fees as they are, except the greener fuels one, and reduce that down to £219, which is the same difference between that and the non-greener fuels as what it is on the current fee. So it would be exactly the same discount, with a view to that being reviewed further down the line, obviously as we get more greener vehicles coming through. Thank you, Chair.
So you put it up to 219.
219, Chair, yes.
Happy for a proposal, yeah, in the debate. The questions are coming.
Have we any, sorry, have we got a seconder? Sorry, Councillor Swinbank.
Yes, I'll second that.
Can I just say something on your proposal, Councillor Foster? You said something about it being reviewed. That can't be part of the proposal. I mean, it's reviewed at statutory sort of times in any event, sort of thing.
That's me just kind of saying it's
that,
something
yes.
we can review
Obviously
further down the line.
Yeah, it will
because
be
obviously
reviewed
as we
at
get
some point in
more
the future.
vehicles, then we're less likely to need the discount to incentivise, so to speak. But at this point in time, to make it £219, and then not as part of the proposal, the committee can review it in future years.
So so your proposal is to go with the proposed fees in Appendix A, say for the greener fuels, which would be 219 instead of 241.
That's correct. Thank you.
That's noting the typo error, as in bullet point 2 on recommendations.
Yeah, essentially there's no change for the private hire operator's licence.
Is there any debate on that? Councillor Wallace.
A question, how would that impact on your covering your costs? In other words, it's almost back to Alan Sharp's question. How many vehicles is it multiplied by that discount does it cost that authority? That's the pertinent point.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I've got so we did some run some reports in June this year for electric vehicles. So what I've got in front of is the council had at the time registered 52 vehicles which were electric out of a total of 372 private hire vehicles and 454 Hackney carriage vehicles.
Thank you for that. Right.
52. Just bear with me a second.
So, Chair, just to clarify, that's 52 electric vehicles in the county of Northumberland that's possibly been put on the road due to our policy of reducing the cost of the licence. But we couldn't say that, could we?
So we want to check my maths here. So basically we were looking at 241. So what basically I've done is 52 times the difference between 204 and 241. So that's 52 times 37, which gives us a figure of 1924. Then 52 times 15, because that would be the increase that would come in if it went up from 204 to 219, which would generate 780. So the actual difference in income is 1,144. I think Trevor worked that out before.
Right, we've had a proposer and a seconder. Yeah, any more debate? Sorry, Councillor Swinburne?
Well, yeah, I'd just like to say, really, I mean, that obviously, you know, we can appreciate you trying to recover costs, but climate change, we have declared an emergency. It should transcend down through all parts of council. I just feel that this is justified.
Thank you. If there's no more debate, we'll go to the vote, please, for the proposal of leaving it as it is, except for electric cars being risen to £219 from 204.
Sorry, just not leaving that as it is. It was the proposed fees.
Proposed fees,
Just
sorry.
in case there's any...
From the current fee of 204 to the proposed fee of now, proposed 219. Could I have a show of hands, please? Those against? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, I think.
Yeah.
Right, that's failed. Could I have another proposer, please? Councillor Hardy
Do we accept the fees as proposed?
and seconder, Councillor Beenan. That's open for debate. Councillor Sessford.
Thank you very much, Chair. Obviously, as you know, last time I asked for a review in maybe 6 months or even at a stretch a year's time to stop these perceived fluctuations all the time. I didn't get a seconder for that. So, you know, what was said was basically that we will go for the cost recovery. And so that's why I'm going to vote the way I am, because basically this is cost recovery. If we went for the last one, it would have been £1,144. You'd have to share out between the other ones, or we don't recover cost. So that's what was decided last time, against what I actually voted for last time. But, you know, democracy rules, and that's what you wanted, so that's what I'm going to go with this time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just have to say, for the sake of £1,000, I'm quite disappointed in that, you know, as a council, when we're trying to champion climate change and we're trying to encourage going greener and reducing the carbon footprint, that we're basically going against this for the sake of just over £1,000. You know, in the grand scheme of things, the budget of this council, £1,000 is a drop in the ocean. So I just want to express my disappointment in that. Thank you.
That's noted. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Hardy would like to sum up as proposer.
Here to provide a service, and if that service costs a set amount of money, then we are duty bound to the people of Northumberland to recover that cost. It's not a green issue, it is a cost recovery issue.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you. We did go to vote, didn't we? Yeah, we didn't. I thought there's been that many votes. We'll go to the vote on that one. All those in favour of the proposal to leave it as the current proposed fees as you have in Appendix A, please show. 10.
Yeah.
Against? 3. Right, that's then carried.
So now we need a proposal.
Oh, sorry, yes.
For it to come into effect no
Yeah.
later than the 8th of February.
The final bullet point. Comes into effect no later than the 8th of February. Well, from what I've been told on the top table here, it would be handy or easiest if it came into effect by the 1st of February.
So we need a proposer.
But we need a proposer for that. Councillor Beenan and Councillor Hardy seconded.
And then have a vote.
Show of hands, please, for that.
So the 1st of February, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12.
And against? Abstentions? 1. Thank you. Right.
Before we move on, do you need to go back?
Yeah,
That's just what I was about to do.
Sorry.
I've been prompted from a long time ago. Things didn't go right on the last proposal, actual proposal. Not the last proposal, the last agenda item. We agreed that from the 1st of January, costs would come into effect from then. Proposer was Councillor Chicken and Councillor Sessford, I think, seconded it. Just for the record, could we say actually what the proposal was to consider and debate the proposal for which determining whether to agree the fees with or without modification and all which would come into effect from the 1st of January?
I think, Chair, the actual decision to increase the fees was fine. I think it was the second part where it was agreed for the 1st of January.
1st of January.
I think it was kind of agreed and then seconded and proposed and the vote should have come after that. So if we could just, obviously Councillor Chicken had proposed the fees coming in on the 1st of January. You still maintain that. Councillor Sesford had seconded to come on the 1st of January. If we could just record a vote for that, just so it's proper in case there's any challenge or anything like that. So the proposal was for the 1st of January for those new fees to come in to effect.
So all those in favour, please have a show. That is
12.
against? Unanimous? Not unanimous. Abstentions? 1. Last meeting of this year, this season, so wish you all a very Merry Christmas.
Do we need next meeting in urgent business?
The next meeting is 15th of February. Is it? Yeah, 15th of February, the next meeting, allegedly. Thank you.